stuff.
Yeah.
Against us down the road. They're not saying that. So they don't care. I should probably.
Yes, I.
Thanks. So much. So we'll pick back up. I don't know where the audio. You're talking about all the great things that Apex has done. I think we should talk about it again. Yeah. I believe Councilor Reeds, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna ask, I appreciate your statement earlier where you're saying, hey, this is, for example, the emotional exhaustion is not an anomaly. I'm seeing this in other local governments I'm working with. Can you talk about the silence? Is that, because I'm seeing that across the board, is that also something that we should see as a trend that's excellent? Thank you.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. It is actually unusual for silence not to be a hot spot in local government. So, yeah, and all you can do is do the best you can with giving them voice and encouraging them to speak up and, making sure supervisors are equipped to solicit and act on voice, that kind of thing. So,
Thank you.
And really some of the strategies we're trying to get through our focus groups. We've thrown a lot at that, and we're going to continue. I think we'll see some progress there. And I want to make sure, Alicia, you can jump in on this if I misstated. When there are hot spots, obviously, but when you look at us versus other organizations that are similar, one of the beauties of having the school of government be the kind of governing body that's working through this with us, they get the benchmarks they're doing with other entities as well. And we have great numbers. So we're always going to look at the things we need to work on those. But as the town, and I can't remember the exact question, but there's one that talks about, would you recommend your family and friends to come work for Apex? And we're in the high 80 percentile with that. And so despite some of the issues that we have, for almost 90% of our employees to say, yeah, I would have a friend or family come work here, it's got to be a good organization to recommend you. So that all said, our numbers are great, benchmarking is great, the efforts of Linda and her team, but I also want to speak to our leadership team. As we brought this forward, there's absolute buy-in from the top, from our leadership team on doing good by our employees and working through the results and the commitment and the numbers that you saw there. And we've had a record response rate, and for our results to be so good with a record response, I think speaks volumes to the team that we have in place. But we always, it's our nature, we want to push the bar, we want to keep chipping away. And so what Alicia was alluding to earlier, of all the effort that we went in post 23, and we had a late start. And so we were a little bit behind because of transition in my position, HR, some transitions there and some outages. So as we've worked through it, we're going to take that same effort, we're going to make it even better. And the bonus is we're doing it in a more timely fashion. So I think we're going to see dividends from those results even more now than we saw from post. So anything you want to add to that? Come from an independent voice.
I always know everything, and I agree with everything that you said. You all do prepare very favorably. And you did a great job with your post 2023 efforts.
I like the last comment about timeliness, right? I kind of feel love on that, like this is 2023 survey that took us forever to get results, and then even longer to actually do something with those results. So for us to be a little bit more immediate in terms of our response and putting action plans in place, I think it will pay dividends. I still think that once every other year seems a little low frequency, to pull employee sentiment. So even if you don't do a full survey, do something that kind of like a midway checkpoint, like at least once a year we put something out there, especially if voice is a a concern, right? Like, I think some of those things would be.
Last question, which is, have you seen local governments address this civil instability effectively in terms of over communication without being off-putting to the community? And do you have guidance on how to do that? You don't have to do it, but I'm just curious.
Yes, I mean, that's part of a course that we're offering. And local governments do different things. Some of it is around combating misinformation, because misinformation fosters incivility. So there's been some effort around there. Some are developing policies. There are a lot of things that local governments can do, and Apex will figure out their own unique, I think, suite of things that can be done. We're at the very beginning of this work. And I think that also local governments across the nation are kind of at the beginning of dealing with these issues, because they've really been kind of, particularly post-COVID, has gotten more intense. So.
Post-COVID, and I think also somewhat political, the national environment towards government employees has not been favorable in the last.
There's a permission structure for instability.
That's caused a ramp up on that.
Just one thing, I just want to shout out all my colleagues for all the work that y'all done to support this effort. I just want to thank you publicly known. I do appreciate you all.
And to give you an example, I don't want to belabor this point, but we had directors that were trying to get our response rates up. Like, I heard offers of the team can throw a pie in my face. Like, there were a lot of efforts put in by our director team to get their numbers up. So really kudos to you guys for the work. Good. All right. Thank you. Okay, we're going to reset now into our dashboard of current initiatives. Celeste, I'm going to ask you to come up. So this is going to be, it's a follow-up discussion from, I think it was at our strategic planning meeting, and we went over the previous 3 years of initiatives. We kind of got it down to what's left that we haven't really significantly put things in motion on. So we want to focus today just kind of on the red items. There's a dashboard that's been developed. Thank you, Celeste. Christy, I think was a big part of that. So thank you, Christy, for your efforts on that. Celeste, you want to start by talking a little bit about the dashboard and what it's.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alan, we're getting some challenges going back and forth.
All right, well, one of the goals was to have a dashboard, which I'm not taking credit for the display of the dashboard. That is all Chrissy Wynn right over here, who produced this dashboard with Power BI. Randy and I have been talking about creating a dashboard, produced it, and we've gone to a whole nother level by adding, we can look at the initiatives that were left. And again, I'm Celeste Fair. I'm sorry, there are a couple council members that probably don't know me. I'm a part of the admin team. Been in the admin team for about 8 months now, but with Apex for almost 3 years. And we did this exercise in October when we were looking at prioritizing the remaining council initiatives, where you had the green and red markers. And so here, I can scroll down. And you all will have, the council will have access to the dashboards. So you can see the green and the red, but we can also filter out the goals by the fiscal year as well, or with the theme of which falls within our strategic plan, and then also the status. So we broke it down in October. If it was green, that was accomplished or well underway. If it was red, that needed more attention or clarification. And then the gray ones were either they were duplicate or they fell outside of the town department scope. So even your elections, the town departments still look for that. So wanted to show you all this dashboard before we move on with the updates. And again, council will have access to the dashboard.
And this will also play out well when we get the next round of initiatives. Load that, but it'll memorialize all the previous initiatives. That's the dashboard, and now we've got a small PowerPoint presentation.
So you haven't sent us the link yet, right?
No, I have not.
Okay. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
It's coming. We wanted to debut it here, and then you'll pick the link.
Because depending on how this goes, we will update the dashboard.
So these are the initiatives that were read when we talked to you in October. So we want to kind of give you an update where we are on those. A couple of them, we may need a little bit of direction still. So we want to just cover them. So we'll start with the 23-24. Again, there were a lot of green initiatives, but these were all the red, which had not had substantial progress when we checked in October. So the first three that we have here are 23-24. Increase elementary school SROs. We had a special projects team that looked to address that. It didn't really lead us down the path that led to an opportunity for us. This we've talked to Chief about and is on his radar screen. So short of any potential funding requests that come from the chief, we're kind of pushing that one to be dealt with at the department level. We will still track it, but we don't at this time. Chief, you can jump in if you'd like on this. We don't anticipate that we need anything from council. We've got to kind of reset on that. We got some resistance from the school board as we approached this topic. So it's still one that we're pending, and as the chief works through his staffing and kind of the reorganization that he did and looking at staffing levels going forward, and we're kind of chalking this one up to it's at the department level and still on our radar screen. Good, Chief, on that? Okay. Next, and if you guys have questions or comments, just jump in. It's the Adopt a Tree Preservation Ordinance. And Diane stepped out on this, but I believe there are some UDO amendments that are proposed and will be coming forward to you all in the next few months. So that one we are considering in the works with those UDO amendments that should be coming forward for tree canopy cover and tree preservation. The third is focused on improving bikeability across the event. So this one it's multifaceted, so I'll say that. I think there's a tie-in with one of the later topics. Councilmember Ziegerman, this will resonate with you. It speaks to roadway design, but we also are in some discussions with DOT. We got some pushback. DOT is changing some of their standards. Chris, if I'm saying anything or you want to chime in on that, jump in. We also had a special project team that focused on e-bikes, right? So it had a different purpose, but one of the things that came out of that was an overall town lack of infrastructure in terms of bikeability, including e-bikes. So that is still a gap that we recognize, but it's got multiple strategies, I guess, to how we would address it. Chris, you want to add anything on that one?
I would say we already do have initiatives in place where we're actively each year, we've got lots of funding that we utilize to do bike lane striping along our major collectors. So I know we did a few years ago, we did Horton Park Boulevard, Marby. With an MI by the electric department. A lot of. And this year we've got, I think, James Street that we're looking at, and one or two other corridors. So we'll be having that hopefully bid later this year.
So thinking about what kind of action you all potentially would like on this, knowing that we are still working with DOT, we are still working within our funding program. We've got some other opportunities that we explored to e-bikes and things that came out of that. If you want to be more intentional on that, we would be open to additional suggestions. Otherwise, those are kind of the programs that we feel like we're addressing it and not taking any specific action beyond what we've described. So when we get there, we can have input, unless you want to now talk about 23-24. So I'll get those. We'll talk about that. Yeah, let's, if you're good, we'll talk about 23-24. So those are the three. Is there any feedback or strategies anybody wants to throw out in addition to what we've mentioned? Or are you satisfied with how we're approaching those items? Oh wait, Marty's got us.
So on the trees, I think there's there's gonna be a work session coming up on April 2. Talk about that. They've got 6 pages of ideas and concepts to discuss at a work session, council to get final direction on how to move forward with it.
So I'm gonna comment on the bikeability stuff. I'm not sure if I'm the originator of this item, but good part will be. So recognizing that we do have a bike and pedestrian master plan, right? The work that's already going into, any new roads getting to with multi-use paths, even though that's not my preferred design, but we really kind of started to fill in the gaps that we have in terms of that infrastructure. It sounds like we're doing the right things, right? So I'm not sure if I have any specific things that I can, put on this bullet and say, yeah, we're gonna go through this, right? Like there's some items in our capital improvement plan, regarding like bike lanes and then improving connectivity. So I think that this is really up to us in terms of like funding prioritization at this point, not so much a separate initiative.
That's good feedback. We appreciate that. And a good example too on the funding side, like if you all said, hey, we want you to double your funding on this, that's important for us to know. But if we're satisfied with the efforts that are underway, and then recognizing that certain projects will come before you in the CIP discussion, that's how we would carry this out.
But that being said, I'm okay with basically removing this one from. But if my colleagues are with me, then.
I'm seeing nodding heads.
Not with that as well.
Any comments on the SROs? Well, summing that up, we're dealing with it at department level. We're still exploring opportunities with the lens of we would like to have some additional SROs, particularly in the elementary school was the focus. For school at this point, they rotate through. I think we're about half coverage. We have 3 for 6 schools, maybe. Or,
Two currently covering the school.
right, for elementary school. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was my trustee and direction wants to go with it. I did have a meeting, I attended a meeting with mayors, town managers with Dr. Taylor. And they were very open to seeing SRO programs on all levels. So obviously the funding was a major factor in that. Yep. But yeah, so I appreciate it.
Any other
Yeah, I
discussions?
was gonna ask about the adopted tree preservation ordinance. Can you speak quickly, or speak it however you want to, about increasing the tree canopy? Well, in those initiatives, what that looks like.
I can't. And Diane stepped out. I don't think we have anyone else planning here.
That'd be part of the whole work
That's the work
session.
session.
It's looking at RCA area, increasing its plantability, where we can plant things. I mean, it's a very complex thing, which is why we ended up turning it into a work session, because to begin with, we were looking at maybe could we bring it to a council meeting for a presentation. Really, it's more complicated than that. We need council's input and direction based on the complexity of and the different options on how you can do it. There's champion trees and all kinds of things that can be considered.
And it's all on the table. So like Marty said, there's 6 pages of ideas that we're going to be bringing. So we're open if you have some suggestions on this.
I do, and as you know, this is something that I wanted to, perhaps the one thing I'm gung ho on, ensuring that we're addressing resident feedback and not only increasing tree canopy, but doing it in a way that's also visible and demonstrates the town heading in the right direction in that regard. And so if addressing increasing apex tree canopy, especially in the suburban core, is going to be well addressed in that work session, I'm happy with moving on, not removing it.
And if I may, just to make sure everyone is aware, is there are legal constraints with what municipalities are authorized to do with respect to tree preservation. So we have to work within those confines as well.
Maybe we'll talk about it. But sure, work sessions.
Yes.
Appropriate. Or before. I mean, I'm happy.
Or before,
Any
but
insight?
maybe not right now.
Okay, good. So moving on from 23, 24. All right, we'll go to 24, 25. Create a Parklet Williams property. I think this was all lumped into one item. We separated it out. the direction we got in October was to kind of hold on this. So we land banked that particular property and there's a hold. That's what I recall. Anybody else? Where is it?
The next to this on the parking lots, like there's a kind of White House, kind of on the far end. We bought part of that property. It's kind of like a eye-shade wedge, like in the backyard basically.
Yeah. And I think it could have been 35 spaces. Does that sound right?
And then we, it could be used for high entertainment, but then we were being aware of like, there might be some noise constraints that are usually problematic for challenges.
So at this point, it's a hold on that. We're not developing actively plans for that property. So okay. All right. Next is the pedestrian bridge over Hume Olive by Friendship Campus. So we continue to have a lot of discussions in this area about pedestrian movement. This is one that, I'll be honest, we aren't really exploring at this point. And so if there is specific action that you all would like to direct us to do, the cost and feasibility of this project are really high cost, low feasibility, high cost, maybe. And so this one is probably going to be red for a while unless you all direct us to do something different. We had the signal that was put in at Blazing Trail, and we met with many of the residents, are encouraging people to funnel down to that intersection where a significant investment has been made. I don't believe, and Chris, you can jump in, I don't believe there's a big appetite from DOT to spend a whole lot of additional dollars for something here that would be.
Right, and that's what I was saying, one of the concerns from staff. There's even a challenge sometimes getting kids to push a button and wait for traffic and cross at the right time, let alone go through probably a switchback to get up onto a bridge for the elevation difference and cross when they can just cross the street. So it's another thing where we could spend a lot of money and time on that, and it still doesn't get used the way we hope it to be. So I think from staff's perspective, it's just not probably the best use of funds right now. Let's see how the signal works and reconsider at a later time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think, situation on the ground keeps changing. That's coming up.
So this one inherently, we'll make code it something other than that. Understood. Okay. Yeah, deferred. Okay, anything else? 24, 25? If not, I'll go to 25, 26. Okay, so the first is expand cart services. Chief spoke about that a little bit this morning. He's got a request in his budget related to expansion of cart. So that will be making it to you all for consideration. But that's the direct expansion to have more capacity up there. So that is something that's definitely in the works. Okay.
Sorry, what is CART?
CART, what does it stand for?
Yeah, it's a co-response model to mental health.
Next is the Rosenwald School Preservation, and actually, Dimitri, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you wouldn't mind, the Councilman Mahaffey to brief on it as well. Between the two of you, if you could give us an update on where we are.
I think Dimitri knows, please.
So over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of conversation with a lot of stakeholders and citizens regarding the preservation of Rosenwald School. And so it came to a pause last year because of the discussions around legal constraints and ownership structure. And so just in the last several months, there's been some discussions with the regional group that has been has worked on other Rosenwald projects across North Carolina. And so we've asked them to come to the table to talk to us about reigniting that conversation, to see about working with us to look at preserving the Rosenwald School. And in that conversation, it's going to be internal first before we bring back the stakeholder groups, because we need to get on the same page internally and to hopefully bring this group in to work with us on it. So I would say over the next month or so, we'll be having those meetings. There's been some communication sent out to this group, with the help of Diane and looking at, having those conversations and seeing where we go next in terms of next steps. Part of the challenge is, of course, that we've been talking about is a location. And so that's going to be at the top of the list to have that discussion.
Good on that one? Next is alternative road designs. Councilmember Eager and I will lead on you a little bit on this. We do have, I think we're in the process of scheduling a meeting. So we've got planning staff, transportation staff engaged. Councilmember Eager is kind of carrying the weight for council on that one. But we are in the works, on what that looks like. I think staff is pulling together some, what we would consider maybe good designs. Councilmember maybe bringing what he considers good designs and ideas. Continue to work on that one. That's the next step.
And so this is really to be more, again, like talking about improving bikeability and pedestrian access across town. Right, our roads traditionally have been designed with vehicular traffic in mind. What can we do, for roads that have not yet been built to change our standards, right? There's it's old news as far as I'm concerned, but it's kind of new in the state, like the complete streets concept, right? Where, you have separated lanes for different modes of traffic, right? We do the 10-foot side paths that combine pedestrian and bicycle, right? Complete streets, you can separate those out a little bit better. Which is really what I would like to see, right? So you're not mixing different modes of transportation in the same, road lane, so to speak. I'm not asking necessarily to go refactor the existing roadway infrastructure, right? That we already do the bike striping where we can, and then have, obviously the through Vision Zero and then safe routes to school, the expansion of our pedestrian capabilities, but certainly, like, as we start looking at new roads and new developments, especially if it's multi-use kind of neighborhoods, like the Verde as like the Sweetwater of the world, how do we put a road infrastructure in place that protects pedestrian and bike traffic, or minimum separates that from vehicular traffic, right? To really promote that, the bikeability, walkability for short distance trips within just small geographic space.
So the way we see it kind of playing out is we'll have that initial meeting and then out of that meeting decide what our next step would be, if it's task force with DOT on it too, or whatever it would look like. If we've got our committees in place, maybe it's something that we also bring an item through one of those committees to talk about, but those kind of would be our next steps.
I understand we're constrained to some degree by what NCDOT allows or has designed standards for, right? Because that's kind of what we're hanging off of. So for me, it's really to understand what kind of the art of the possible is within the constraints that are given. And then, how do we promote that, as we see new zoning requests come in, right, to explore these type of street concepts a little bit more proactively, rather than me asking the question at a zoning hearing, right, when it's really already too late.
Okay. I think we've got a plan there to move forward. Next is protect and encourage mobile home developments. Marla, I may lean a little bit on you, give you a heads up. So this is one I want to say Councilmember Killingsworth brought this up originally. It was out of concern of a couple of our mobile home parks that are still in Apex that development which would come and residents there would be displaced. So what could we do as a jurisdiction to work within our legal rights and with the property rights of the owner, but then also have a layer of protection. I want to say we even talked about the land trust maybe being a long-term option, or there were some different discussions. I know legal got engaged a little bit on this, but Marla, you want to add anything?
Yes, so one of the things that we are undertaking is an analysis of the process that Orange County and Chapel Hill utilize, because they have a whole strategy for how to protect mobile home developments, not so much creating new developments, but strategies that can be taken to try to protect them. It was largely a community-driven process, and so our senior housing specialist has done some work on a potential policy, but I've asked them to take a step back to actually engage with Orange County to understand how they got to the point of the policy that they did, what were the roles of various organizations, because you had the county, you had a couple of municipalities, but you also had a large advocate base that played a role. And so, this is the part where we're at now, is trying to understand all of the different pieces and the various roles. And then with that, maybe come to you all with a suggestion on some strategies that we might employ. But I thought, since we have an example just right up the road, it might be best for us to really dig in and understand how that unfolded before we start down a similar path, especially because of some of the contact we've had with at least one of the property owners that made us know that we needed to tread carefully.
So if there's anything specific council would like, other than what Marla talked about and what actions we're looking at, welcome feedback.
I don't think there's anything specific. I think it's just kind of a concern for, the residents area. Looking at facing the future and kind of reaction to what we're seeing, areas.
Right.
Going through this right now and a year or two ago, and it could be next year. So kind of planning for that and how we can prevent it or mitigate it or whatever we can do to be aware it's something that's on the horizon. To deal with. Better to have a plan in place than wake up tomorrow and suddenly figure out how to respond to a situation.
And we still have $500,000 on hand to help with any potential relocation. That was a fund that you all established a few years ago. So we still have that in place should something happen before we have come back to you with any kind of policy recommendations and strategies. We do still have that available.
Yeah, for me, I would just like to understand what our rights or abilities are, right?
Limited.
Understood, right? Property rights range free. But really kind of understanding, okay, what can we not do, right? So that we can have more informed conversation around this, right? I think the intent here is to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, right? In this case, in the form of mobile home communities. That's, we are subject to property rights. But, what avenues do we have?
Right. And that's why we wanted to start with the Orange County work, because it was a process that they went through over a year of working together, a variety of community meetings and so forth, before they actually got to the point of policy adoption. So we really wanted to study and understand that, and then start to have our own internal conversations with legal planning to see, okay, what are the options available for us, and then be able to come to you all with some suggestions.
What is the policy?
Pardon?
Do you have any details of what the policy basically is?
I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but we do have that information.
So maybe the next step on this is bringing it to feel equally much in that. So talking with legal on what some of our potential options would be, scheduling it for work session.
Another concern is the owner occupied mobile homes, where the life cycle of those mobile homes are expiring. And some of those who are living in those mobile homes may not be able to afford new housing. And so they may have to go somewhere else or purchase another mobile home to go in that same spot. So having a conversation around, does the money that we have available can assist with that, maybe putting a plan in place, because that was one of the concerns that I think the church had some concerns around, some people needing some assistance with those houses, with those mobile homes, getting to a point where it's beyond repair.
The possible strategy of rehousing those that.
Just have another question about it. Being on the radar, where there's no surprises, is their focus as far as monitoring type of potential.
Sale of the property?
Yeah, in the event there's discussion about it.
So I think there is a statutory requirement that if you're going to discontinue a mobile home, there's, I can't remember the specific details, but there is certain notices that have to be given to the state. And I,
180 days.
yeah, I feel like we,
Day notice.
and I feel like we had talked about setting up a relationship with whatever office that is that would receive that notice so that they would inform the town in the event that one of the mobile home parks in our community were going to be shutting down.
And Carrie is going through this, so they receive the same, notice, or maybe something that we. Yeah, I think the residents receive the 180-day notice, but I think this is something at a different level, not just to the residents, this is.
No,
to
this
the
is something
state.
to the state. Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate knowing that, because then if we could have that relationship with the state, so we would be also some of the first to know, if that is indicated, then that would give us a little more leeway to act.
And in the event there's a development looking at a particular property, I mean, I think planning is going to be well aware of these conversations and be able to let us know that these are happening.
Right.
Okay, so the next plan will be a work session. We've got some openings, spring and summer.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last item on 2526 is Salem Street pedestrian zone options, expand the Salem streetscape plans. So to me, there's a couple of concepts there that we can talk about, and part of the expansion of the streetscape we might be able to discuss tomorrow. At 10:25, we have the downtown master plan and Commerce Street discussion. So tangential to that, we might be able to talk about future expansion of the streetscaping project. Any other thoughts, Chris? You got anything to add on this one? I'm not sure what.
I think I've heard prior discussions from council members about, I'm assuming that what that's come out is, now that we're finishing up the block between Chatham and Saunders, is there ever a desire to do something similar between, say, Chatham and 55? And some of that, I mean, planning's got the master plan, they worked on the S-Line mobility plan. Some of that may be generated through private development or redevelopment of that corridor that could allow it to be not publicly funded. And then there's also the possibility that over time we may fill gaps or do a public project. But I think there's nothing been done today on that, other than the planning side.
We also still have pending the, I'll call it Facade Grant 2.0 program that still hanging out there. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if anyone's heard lately from the farm that they were one of the recipients, potential recipients of that grant program, which the hope from council was that by seeding that, it would help spur on some redevelopment or some change and expansion of downtown into that area. So
I got an update, but.
okay, all right. So we'll talk more about that, but that was one of the concepts that council put forward over the last year to kind of kick off something in that segment. So that's pending.
Got to just heard last.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one?
We could probably cover it tomorrow, but it's like the pedestrian zone, I think was really to have the ability to walk off the street, like have the bullets come out of the grounds, right? And then, turn Salem Street into the pedestrian zone, either, festivals or just, Friday night through Sunday night, right? Like the weekend, something like that. To limit food traffic and make it more pedestrian friendly, make it more for the inspection. I think that can be incorporated or may already be incorporated in the current work in progress. So, but I think that was really the pedestrian zone part of that conversation.
You said that we'll be talking about it tomorrow, so I feel like we could perhaps bump the rest of that conversation to tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah,
I'm not putting anything on ice today. We'll just warm it up tomorrow.
Okay. So for the most part, I feel like we've got substantial progress on these are kind of the old initiatives, I'll call it. We'll update the dashboard because I think it's important. We'll send a link out. So we'll update it, but there's a delay, a lag between an update and a couple hours. I think it takes for it to fully show. But we'll send out the link because you all should be looking at the dashboard over the next couple of days. On Friday, one of our exercises is we want to start to hear your feedback on potential new initiatives. And so we didn't go over all the green outside of these, so you might want to, even for our newer members, something you might propose, maybe it's already been on the list of screening, so taking a look at the dashboard as you think about some new initiatives to propose would be beneficial. So we'll update the dashboard based on the feedback we got today. But I feel pretty good about where we are on these, and we're open to any other overall comments on anything we need to look at to kind of close out these older initiatives that are still in the works, but then look towards new capacity. Good. Okay. Thank you, Celeste, for all your work on this. And Kristen, thank you. All right, we are still slightly ahead of schedule. So next is our budget overview and financial conditions. This is Jessica, John. So I see Jessica. Oh, there's John. John's in the back. I was like, why aren't you at the table? Okay, I don't know how to do it. So I'll invite Jessica and John up. I don't know what order you guys are going in. Just tag team together. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Anywhere over here? Okay, we're thankful for the extra time, because we had 30 minutes to do 29 slides. So it was gonna be pretty tight, so we're very thankful for this. So Jessica and I will be tag teaming this, alternating slides. We kind of, I don't know if we intended to structure it so that we've got a break, but it kind of worked out that way. So two preliminary parts to this. So one is we're just going to quickly run through the unaudited results for 2025. That audit is still in progress. It's not finished yet on our file with the state. And then we're looking at the first 6 months of fiscal 2026. So talking a lot about last year and a lot about this year. Agenda. So again, going to look at this is structured by looking at your 4 major operating funds, your general fund, water and sewer, electric, and stormwater. Since most of your decisions in the upcoming year are going to be in those buckets and buckets. We'll talk about fund balance. We'll talk about cash availability, your investment returns, capital reserves, and a brief update about your project progress. This is a snapshot, just a table of your general fund FY25 ending balances. So your ending budget number, your actuals, and then the numerical difference, and then the percentage of the budget. So just to give you some context here, we have net income in the general fund, about $7.5 million. That is driven in part by pretty much all of your major revenue sources were at or exceeded their budget. And your 4 major types of expenses, personnel, operating costs, maintenance, repair, and capital generally came in under.
John, that's not how I'm reading it. But our budget says 113, actual was 107, so we generated less revenue.
You did come in under, yeah, so you came in at 95% of budget, but then your expenses were at 88%.
Right. So just go confused on the variance, because it looks like an overage is actually projected as a trade as a negative.
Sure.
Anyway,
Sorry, yeah.
I think the message is clear. So help me understand how we can be $6 million off in our forecast on revenue and 12% off
That is
in our
most,
forecast on expenditures.
that is mostly driven by other financing sources. So those are budget transactions that don't actually generate accounting transactions. So like fund balance appropriated, those types of transactions. They show up in your budget, but then they flow through into those net changes. So that's off by 7.9 million.
If you bring in extra revenue and all the other line items, then
You
you
don't need
don't
as much.
do the transfers at the end of the year because they were necessary.
So at the end of the day, we generated 107 million, we paid 100 million. So there's a $7.5 million overage that's went into fund balance.
Next slide.
Yes.
So your ending fund balance in fiscal 24 was 51.7 billion. We take that 7.3 net income, we add it to have a new fund balance of 59.9. There are a couple numbers we have to back out of that before we get to a bucket of money that you can actually make decisions. There are some, what they call state stabilization, which is a formula to kind of keep you off of cash flow issues. So we'll back that out. We also back out in your 2026 budget. It includes a decision to spend some money, 3.9 million going towards capital projects. We also have certain items that we intended to purchase in fiscal 25 that did not go or delivered, received until fiscal 26. So we carry that money forward automatically. That gives you an unassigned fund balance of 33.4 million. And you have a policy for the town to keep that at 25%. So to keep you maximum flexibility, keep your bucket at 25. So that gives you 4.9 million to use. We also have some other policies about once it gets above, then we transfer some of it into capital. We will be bringing back when these numbers are final and on file with the state, kind of that decision. Electric operations. So this is the income statement for the electric fund. Your operating unit revenue is the money we build. I've separated out interest on idle money just because there's a point that we will make in a later slide specifically about interest earnings. Then you've got personnel, operating costs, purchase for resale, which is the single biggest costs that are in electric, and then your pay going to debt. So all in all, electric cleared $1 million of a surplus in fiscal 2025, and so its balance rose from 17.6 million to 18.6. That balance covers 31% of its operating expenses, which is, we clearly gave it, it's not exactly healthy. And the cash on hand was about $10 million. So if you divide expenses by the number of days a year, you can only cover about 61, 62 days of electric operations with this cash.
So what would be ideal, because this one has traditionally been lower than what we would like to see. So remind me please of what's we would like the fund balance and cash on hand, days cash on hand. Would be
90 days cash on hand for
90.
electric.
And it actually is about 2 days better than the same number last year. So it's a little bit better, but it's not quite moving in the exact direction we want. Give you an example of a much healthier fund. Here's the water and sewer utility fund. Again, it cleared about $486,000 in net income. So it moves from 23.2 to 23.7. Its operating fund balance is sufficient to cover 90% of your expenditures for that year. And you have cash on hand of 311 days. So significantly stronger.
And is this, I know we're kind of saving up for the big expansion of the Western Lake Reclamation Facility. So is this kind of just a temporary state because we know we're going to have that big outlay, capital outlay in the future? So do we kind of need to back that out to some degree, or?
We wouldn't back it out at this point, that it's available cash on hand, but the intention of where it's been at so far is to help us when we get to that point in expansion.
Because it'll be like a mix of cash and debt and different types of financial infrastructure to pay for it. So we don't, maybe not use all of this. Some of this gets rounded out to smooth debt payments over time.
Right. And then so what I'm really thinking about is how do we kind of, because it's kind of distorting the number a little bit, right? Because we know we've been saving up for this big expense that we know is coming. We kind of roughly know what that expense is going to be. So if you kind of were to back that out, what does the fund balance look like? Is it still healthy? Or are we still kind of saving more than we need to, in which case we would have more resources to take on additional capital projects?
It is still healthy. We wouldn't take more from our cash on hand. We would rely more on debt if necessary. We do have, however, in the capital analysis for the funds. So we're considering those debt payments over time and what would be coming from fund balance and cash. So it is considered just separately because just the accounting, this is what we do have. But we are considering what those higher caps are in our capital analysis.
So as part of the reason for the actual versus the budget is it based, my understanding would be based on the fact that we're accounting for a certain amount of maintenance that we may have to incur that year And if we end up getting lucky and we don't have those maintenance issues, it's not a heavy cost that year. We end up, so it's really about, that's where we're getting our savings at. It's like we're budgeting for anticipated potential maintenance costs, and sometimes we have better years and not really.
And that's fine, right? I want to leave more on the total balance, the operating balance, and because 311 days cash on hand seems like a lot, right? That's kind of what's back into that number might be some of our savings for Western Wake expansion. And so again, like my ask for is to, what do we kind of set up when I say, what does our fund balance and cash on hand look like? And does it create, do we have opportunity to invest a little bit more in water, sewer infrastructure, right? Or are we kind of right where we need to be, or are we even under, right? It's like the way electric seems to be. So I just think that big nut is kind of thrown the balance numbers a little bit.
Maybe another way of showing it and not officially reporting, but from a PR standpoint, I'll use that, is take the cash on hand number and say, okay, if 90 days is our goal for the fund balance, show that number. We've definitely got 90 days. Then everything else goes into a capital reserve fund. It's still cash on hand, but it's a subset of that is capital. I think maybe shows it differently, because then all that money is above and beyond the 90-day, which is a healthy reserve. Does that make any sense? So it's not an official reporting thing, but from a public.
Yeah.
And it may come out in the capital funding discussion. So I'm going to send down for a moment for that.
All right, and so last FY 2025 slide, it is about stormwater utility operations, the newest enterprise fund that we have. You have a net income there of $956,000. And again, that operating balance, it covers about 2/3 of your annual expenditures, and cash on hand is actually quite high, but that is mostly driven by expensive things.
And building our, based on the assessments, our capital plan. So we knew that with the inception of stormwater that we were doing all the studies now to help build our capital plan. And now that we have that for this upcoming year, we'll be able to start utilizing.
Did we incur everything large expenditure?
Yes, for the capital project grant that we just received. So the allocated funds are matched for that.
So this just gives you that snapshot again of the general fund, added affordable housing and debt service to this, just for illustrative purposes. You have the net revenue and expense in each of those funds, consistent with the prior slides, where their fund balances ended, how much cash they actually had on hand at year end, and then just as a snapshot, how much you spend in each of those funds per day.
So what would drive the difference between the balance and the cash on hand? Is that like outstanding collections?
Outstanding collections, but also like accounts payable. So at June 30th, there's lots of bills that, we might get the invoice in July kind of thing. So it gets backed in and reduces operating balance as of 6/30, and then it comes on cash at a later date.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about something a little bit more recent, 2026. So this is where we're going to get back into me and Jessica really alternating the way this is structured. I'm going to talk about your two major revenue sources for the general fund, and then we'll do a quick run through on actuals. Jessica will talk about a forecast, kind of what does this look like at the end of the year. Talk about your actual property tax levy. There's two components really driving that. Recent revaluation for Wake County last year, and an intentional property tax rate increase in the current year budget. This looks very strong. As of 12/31, we collected 63, or Wake County has collected and paid us 63.3 million. I will say, normally in prior years, that number at 12/31 was like about 80%. But Wake County paid out about $7 million more towards the end of December than they did in the last couple of years combined. So we went from this number here representing normally 80% of what you're going to get to being like 86, 87%. And it's purely based on timing of when Wake County collected it. You divide your tax rate three ways. between the general fund, affordable housing, and to settle your debts. And so then this takes those numbers from above and backs it into the different purposes. The other major general funds revenue source is sales taxes, and I just kind of gave you a budget to actual overview. I am used to in my prior local government career working in a place with a lot of seasonal activity. I'm happy to say Wake County doesn't seem to have that. What you collected in the first 3 months of the year, you generally can multiply that times 4, and that's the number you're going to have at the end of the year. Just as a reminder, this is levied by Wake County. It's collected by the North Carolina Department of Revenue. The county can decide how it wants to distribute these revenues. They're considered shared. They distribute it based on population. They can also do it based on tax base. Apex's relative size of its population means we get more money. One point I do like to point out about this, because it is a topic in the legislature at the moment. 15% of your sales taxes for as a municipality are actually driven by Medicaid. So Medicaid discussions at the legislature could impact that number. Scare anybody, but just put it in the back of your mind.
The good news before that statement is it looks like it's trending well.
It's been trending very well.
Quarter
yeah.
one over quarter one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our discussion at the start of, or during the budget this year, we were arguing about what the sales tax would be.
Yeah, we were worried about it.
We were worried about it.
About 2%.
Yeah, I mean, that looks like 10%, right?
There was I guess,
Yeah.
it was kind of like a fake out last year where suddenly the growth that had been very strong since 2020 kind of stalled out. And a lot of municipalities like these didn't see as much growth in their sales tax base, but that appears to have gone away. Like I think statewide, they're trending at like 5.5%. So this is budget for actual as of 12/31. Just to give you a sense, again, that big snapshot, we've broken out a couple different more ways on the expense side. These are all your major revenue sources, and with the exception of only 2 of the categories, most of them are already at over 50%, which is what you want. You want to collect more than half your revenues. And all your cost centers, with the exception of transfers out for moving things to capital projects, all that is generally below 50%. Above on revenues and below on expenses. With that, I would turn that over to Jessica to talk about the forecast for the rest of the year. Where do we think we're going to be?
So we're forecasting to continue on that trend. In terms of our revenue, our Parks and Rec, field, shelter, rentals, community center programming, and senior center programming is doing much better than anticipated, as well as our permits are slightly ahead of our typical trend at this point this year. So overall, we're looking to hit close to our budget. And on the expenditure side, in terms of operating, maintenance, repair, capital, other financing uses, we're looking to spend most of that. The one exception is personnel. We're at about 94% projection, and a lot of that has to do with just vacancies in higher level positions this year. So looking to net about 5.5 million.
So I love coming in under budget like any other game. But we've also heard across the board the needs of the organization, right? So can we use this projection of, let it be around $5 million profit, so to speak, to maybe pull forward some expenses that are planned or programmed for future fiscal year, right? And kind of catch up on some of the needs that our staff has figured.
So we typically do that. We do some more in-depth projections. This month, we start talking to departments about their plans for the rest of the year. So these are our preliminary ones. So in March is when we start diving further into revenues, because we'll have more information. For example, sales tax, we only have one payment. So we get some more refined projections. And then we look at what we're potentially going to net, and we will have departments pull forward like equipment that is necessary, that is going to be planned for the future budget. And sometimes we come back to you guys towards in June to allocate some additional funding to capital projects as well. So
And it won't potentially change the forecast that much, but even last night, we brought a couple general fund positions. By the time they get hired, it will be less of an impact. Right, and so like it'll impact these numbers significantly. Obviously, it will have a budget and forecast impact on the out years. But I'm thinking like, some of this, right, like, Steve Johansson came to us last year wanting to get like basically 100 new police cars, something like that. We gave him.
Plus or minus, but-
Plus or minus, we gave them like, yeah, I know it does, right? So can we, purchase a couple of those vehicles, to just kind of keep a little bit more current with the needs of some of, those types of expenses. Maybe not the whole,
Yeah, no, but we do work with departments to do that. It takes relief off of next year's funding.
So coming back to, budget action again, about the water and sewer fund. This is slightly formatted differently. So you've got your budget, your actuals, and then I've also plugged in the prior year numbers so you can compare. The revenues are lower, mostly due to some timing issues. Your interest on idle funds is a little over halfway. We're 51%. The expenditure categories are all very low, really, realistically. Looks like you've left, for example, 8% of the salary for that year in water and sewer. All in all, your budget is trending 7% more.
I think, like some of those make sense. You mentioned earlier, vacancies. Possible projected. Like, some of the operating, like, that kind of stood out that we're only 18% operating budget.
In terms of operating revenues, so that is more a timing issue specifically. So with the new ERP systems that we're now operating, we are.
I was actually referring to operating.
So here, yeah, maintenance is low. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of like purchase for resale in water and sewer that just hasn't happened.
So Carrie bills us quarterly, so that's usually a delayed effect.
Okay, so we're missing a quarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, sometimes they don't even bill us quarterly,
So it's still good. It's like 18% compared to 25% versus 50.
It could be a lot of our expenses are back end loaded, right? But anything else with the tail end of the fiscal year.
And in terms of forecasting, this one's main difference from last year is personnel again. We had several vacancies. Those are filled now and included in the future projection. And then we're also trending to do better on our operating revenues this year than we did last year. So this one's looking at a net of potentially $4 million.
Electric, kind of the same real situation as water and sewer in this case. Operating expenses, roughly similar, like personnel's to budget. Operating costs also are lower. Payments and repairs lower. Capital is about half.
In terms of the forecast, we are looking to spend about 90% of the budget, and in terms of expenditures, and this fund is trending a lot lower on in terms of the residential side of utility billing. So we're looking at about 90% of our budget. So in total, though, we would net about 300.
Can we go back to that? So the trending on operating revenue is trending lower. Is that because, is that still because we have a large amount of accounts receivables outstanding that we haven't collected and we don't think we are going to collect? Like why we, having the account receivable is one thing, right? But obviously we need to collect it at some point.
Yeah.
So are we planning to write some of that up, or why is this trending lower, I guess?
Well,
right now, we don't have the policies in place to ensure we're going to collect on those. So this is based on what we are collecting currently so far this year. This is where that would lead us. We would be about 9 million low on the residential side. The commercial side is the side that is performing to come in on target.
Okay, and so maybe, ask the question different. So is this kind of a cash flow forecast or is this like so what kind of accounting method are we using here?
Well, yeah, so let me jump in real quick. So the actual operating revenues represented based on build. And there is a little bit of, that forecast can get a little wiggly because of seasonality. The billings will go up as we get towards summer. And so you could get in kind of in a situation where, you know, you're trying to estimate based on what the bill revenue look like right now. And April, May, they could spike up in a way that would drive you right over that money list. So it's kind of more downside of estimating in December and January what people are going to use.
But we also, tomorrow, John has a presentation at 1 o'clock that we have a significant uncollected on the electric side.
And then we haven't done anything with it on the accounting side of that one. Yeah, so this is just.
You know, I think the high level point that I'm getting at is like if our total budget for expenditures is $64 million and you're projecting with some caveats you just gave that we're under by almost $7 million this year. That's a really big deal. Right? Like, it's not like, you know, it's over 10% of our overall budget. You know,
Which again is, you know, money we cannot spend on doing the things that we need to do, right? Creating more backlog, right, for future years. So, okay, we'll kind of hold the conversation about the outstanding collections till tomorrow. It's on play, but appreciate the.
Yeah, underlining again, like that's a really big problem. Right?
Further that, these are some of the challenges that we're looking at for this upcoming fiscal year. We're currently working on updating our rate model and we're going through a debt study for the electric fund. But just in comparison, if nothing else changes in the entire budget request, which is unlikely, we know for a fact that these things are happening. System expansion, we're currently spending about 4 million per year. If we're to serve Viridia, that is going to go up to 7 million per year. System maintenance, our system is aging, so we have been increasing in maintenance costs by about 20% per year. Our average annual increases between market merit and benefits is an extra 950,000. The personnel additions that have been requested for this next year would be about $1 million. Those would specifically be to support the expansion and system development. Then we also know that our NECEMCO rate increase is 4.5%. That's an additional $1.82 million. And we have a NECEMCO rider that will be a payment of $800,000. So that alone, if nothing else changed in the budget, that's an 11% increase to our current operating budget for electric. So we just wanted to put this on the radar. We're going to be coming back with debt study information, rate information, but we're facing some heavy challenges with it.
In regards to system expansion, some of that is offset by fees we collect from connection. Like, to what degree do we, I guess, are we made whole by the connection fees, whatever you call them, capacity fee, called for electric?
Yeah. Do you know somebody?
This is for water, it's capacity fee, right? But for electric, it's just a connection fee or.
So I'll let Kathy correct me. She's not been here a long time. She's jumping industry standard. I'm gonna tell you typically what we've done in NAPEC. Typically our expansion, when we're doing expansion, is the line stops here and there's a neighborhood coming over there where Randy is sitting. And so we have to go across the road or up the street a block, right? That's our expansion. And then the overhead, if you will, town takes on that as a utility. Then once we get into the neighborhood, the development pays for underground. We righted that a couple of years ago. If you recall, we used to have a very low fee and we weren't covering ourselves. So we upped that and try to make ourselves whole there. And electric looks at those rates every year. I imagine they're looking at them right now to make sure that the fees that we will be charging next year for underground are adequate to cover our costs.
Beyond that, I mean, in terms of the system expansion going across the
So-
street,
So what I'm getting at is we don't, when you serve a Veridia and you have to expand 2 miles, 3 miles and do a substation upgrade, that is not covered by that development. We have to recover that.
but if the development has 1,000 homes, don't you charge each a one-time fee when they first plug in?
No, sir.
No, you just do it for water you pay.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing for electric like that. There's no authorization for choosing not to do it.
That I don't, what I would say is if we did do that, most likely, anytime there was choice, the customer would choose to go with the alternative.
It also seems like we're mixing capital and operating expenses on this slide, because system expansion presumably is capital.
We handle system expansion, in the operating fund currently. Brady most likely would be, is a still all coming out of the electric funds funding sources, so.
Right,
But in
yeah,
terms of,
you
yes,
create
that
an
1%,
asset, right?
the extra 3 million would be, in a capital project.
Right, but from an accounting point of view, you would just see the depreciation. Yeah, so the cost there, that 2.7, 2.8 million will be kind of be spread over multiple years.
But this is not one-time cost, this is like the average annual cost.
Correct, Brady, I think we have it in the CIP program for 4 years,
Yeah.
4 million each, so it's ongoing for the immediate future.
Ongoing, so this year 28 will be another 7 million. And we just make that up just in rates eventually is the idea, like connected, filling them and. So we're gonna connect to us.
So again, fully understanding what this number is and the percentage that she mentioned. So 11% based on this.
But it's, the same $7.5 million that we said we're missing on the previous, right? So like, it's kind of within the realm of our current planning scope. It's just based on our current outlook of having lower collections, lower expenditures this year, it makes 2027 look scarier.
Well, this is an increase over the adopted budget, not what we're projecting to finish this current year. So shortfall this year, only 60 days cash on hand plus all the duties. This year.
Ask about the average annual increase on the third category.
Yes.
Is that 11.5% increase? Is that standard?
So for the past 3 to 4 years, we've done a 2% market, a 3 to 4% average merit, so that could range from 2% to 5% per employee. And then on top of that, it's really the medical expenses. Like the most current year was over 15% increases. So that is just looking, I did a 5-year average of how much we're increasing in those personnel lines, and the average was hit that.
Retirement too.
And retirement as well, yes.
Thank you. So that's not just wages.
No, that's not just wages.
Thank you. That makes sense. Yes.
Full
Appreciate it.
rate, full rate cost on a person. Stormwater, is our last slide on a bunch of the actuals. So again, similar routine as before, you have expenditures tracking significantly lower than budget in the stormwater fund. But still higher than the prior year, that's just given the budget plan. Stormwater is definitely benefiting a lot from the current interest rate. And the forecast.
We're looking at approximately 350K in net. They're performing spot on point in the year and based on trends from previous years of where we've been. Where the personnel line item is forecasting to go slightly over because those training positions were approved. So those are factored into that cost and will shift funds from the other areas that were not fully.
Overall, really healthy.
Yeah,
This one have a net 400K. So
Yeah.
And this is just that snapshot of the various fund balances. Took the cash, and again, did that same cash on hand versus your average daily expense. Most of the utility funds have not really shifted that much from where they were 6/30. And the general fund net change is really mostly driven by that enormous Wake County. Did want to throw this in here because this is something that will not provide as much budget relief, I believe, in the upcoming year. Our current average rate of return on the town's, deposits is about 3.6 to 3.8%. The Federal Open Market Committee is likely to lower interest rates over the coming year. So it's probably going to land, I think I've seen some dot charts that landed somewhere around 3% in 2027. So the amount of money we earn on cash in the bank is going to go down. And this is just the actual overview of the cash in commercial banks versus the investment portfolio. And some of it is invested over a slightly longer term, and I've charted out when that cash is actually available to the town. We do have one bond that isn't, we don't get back until 2022.
And remind me, like, we're statutorily limited in what our investments can be, is that true? Like, it has to be government bonds or, no, yes?
No Bitcoin.
No
No Bitcoins, no stocks, it's basically all fixed income.
Could be private company bonds or the,
You gotta do, whatever the highest paper rating, so either AAA or AA.
so it'll be AAA rated.
Well, we do have in this, we do have some bonds, it's very common to get commercial paper in auto industries. So they'll do a 60-day note, Hyundai needs to buy some parts to some cars, sell the cars. Town gets the money back, 60-90 days after we loan them.
No mutual fund.
There are some mutual funds, but they're mutual funds that then turn around and invest in government fixed income. So
If we invest in SPY, we will earn a lot from the past year. That's that,
Right.
SPY.
That's the whole point, is that we cannot just go
I know.
speculate with the taxpayer dollars.
Exactly,
Right, so.
yeah. I'm just kidding.
I grew up in Winston-Salem. I'll just say an anecdote out there. Winston-Salem got special statutory exemption to the investment statutes twice, and they chose to invest in Wachovia.
Oh.
And then they invested in Dell as part of the economic development for the factory that then closed after 2 years. So basically, every time anybody's ever gotten an exemption to that statute, it is blown up in their faces. I'm just telling you what I know. Future capital projects, we have 6 capital project funds active.
Trending pretty well on what we're working on so far. Overall, across all the capital projects, we're about 60% completion of what we have currently funded.
There's a lot going on here around town in this one.
Is this a type here outlook?
This is all the projects that are authorized and what we spent.
This is just a current snapshot to date.
Okay.
What the budget is for each of those funds, how much has been spent, how much is currently encumbered in contracts, and then what the remaining balance on that fund is, and percent. That's basically.
Quick update on your debt, just townwide, the annual debt payments going out to repay the town's installment notes and bonds is about 15.3 million. We're planning at least 2 issuances before the end of fiscal 2026. $25 to $30 million lob for some projects that we're refining the list of projects that'll go on that right now. And we're going to do another rolling stock loan for about 2.8 million to finance the town's vehicles purchases for this fiscal year. And you still have $24.5 million of streets and sidewalk bonds that we haven't issued. You will eventually, start some projects there and should do funds. Threw some tables together of the town's actual outstanding debt. Total that is 133 million. I used the Apex Source score to tell me that there's 84,788 residents. So we owe about $1,500 per resident, which is fairly low based on the peers benchmark.
Better than the US government. Much better.
That's not a very hard bar to. The main thing I wanted to draw your attention to from a stewardship perspective on this slide is that if you'll notice, this is part of our debt and capital model. The annual amount we pay is going to decline to about 2 million over the next 5 years. So the goal is to add new debt so that we keep that revolving and keep projects moving forward. Don't have quite as much room in the business activities, but in the general fund of your government projects, we're going to have a little bit of room just for debts being paid off to issue new debt without needing to really change the. These are the balances, your capital reserves that are unobligated as of December 31st, 2020. So you've got a little bit of money in the cemetery fund, recreation capital, system development fee, transportation.
What's the development fee that we collected?
That's the water.
Water.
Yeah.
So we can use that to help fund the expansion of the butcher market.
That's also how we fund oversizing for development.
And I showed up earlier also when our balances, numbers being really big, and we're really happy.
Yeah.
Because I know.
Can you go back? Yeah, okay. That cemetery fund, can you explain that?
We do have a permanent fund of money for the operation of the town. So sales of plots goes into this bucket, and then we can use it to build. There was a recent project.
Yeah.
Columbary.
Okay.
Develop some niches that will replenish this.
Sales are good.
Yeah, we'll be selling some niches that'll.
Good.
That's not too much of a different number than just the prior year. So it seems to make sense.
And you can only use the cemetery funds for the cemetery maintenance.
Okay. I see, yeah. And, okay.
Questions?
I'm gonna go too deep in, but, so we talked a lot about the community investment funds. And typically called it investing in 7% of whatever it was. That chart didn't show anywhere up in the slide deck. So where does that fit into all these funds? Like, is there an actual physical community investment fund, or is it more of a collection of funds with a concept in the spreadsheet?
It
What is the
fits
actual?
inside our governmental debt fund because the way that we're funding those projects with that money is through debt payments, based on everything we have in our debt model. So I think we did on the fund balances,
Yeah, we did put
we
it on.
included that, and it is much, it's higher than last year because it's the first year of the.
So the balance of it is 8.5 billion.
Okay, so community, so government debt service fund balance.
Yeah,
That's community investment.
That's correct.
Okay.
So could we break it out then, kind of in the tax rate allocation?
I think it did.
Yeah, we did.
Next one in the back. Keep skipping beforehand.
There we
It's right here. So
Okay, there it is, that's right.
there's your tax rate. Break out that, and these are the percentages. And so as the tax revenue comes in, it's being deposited in respective tax.
Doing great on time if we're done with that section. 10-minute break. We got a break.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 minutes.
You're never gonna lose this
Smells like. Smells like tropical fruit. That doesn't taste like-
Tastes like medicine.
like water.
Me too.
Well, from- yes, I'm like this, so I try not to-
Cough drop.
I have to-
That's like a lot of micro.
That's a good age. Ready. So we're back in session.
All right. We are going to talk about the capital projects prioritization results from your recent survey. This is just a quick recap from the presentation we did in December. We currently have 98 projects in the general fund CIP, totaling over $650 million. We also have projects in our utility funds as well. We've got about 55 in there. So the exercise that you all just went through, and I thank you for your patience. I know we had some technical difficulties with that, but we did end up collecting all the information. And so a reminder, the projects that were prioritized are ones that are, the ones that were not prioritized would have fallen out of that immediate 5-year purview, are required for operations, building maintenance, HVAC repairs, or our ongoing projects. So you all took this survey and you ranked your projects from your top priority to your lowest priority. And then in the second step, you were asked what strategic goals each of those projects aligned with. So here are the results. Based on where you put them in your priority ranking, we averaged those scores from all 6 members. And you'll see here that annual pavement management was the #1 ranked project. Not going to read every single one of them, but on the next slide, I did zoom in on the top 5 and bottom 5 projects just because that chart is so large. So the top 5 projects were annual pavement management, all of Chapel Road at Apex Barbecue Road improvements, Apex Peakway at Tingen Road intersection improvements, Fire Station 3 renovation and addition, and the downtown projects for Commerce Street and Seaboard Street. And then our lower range projects were Tingen Road, pedestrian tunnel, EV infrastructure development, community park trail widening, nature park operations maintenance building, and the solar initiative. Looking here at the strategic plan alignment, any project that was selected by more than 2 or more council members to align with the strategic goal is shown here. So we split this into 2 slides because the dots would be very small otherwise. So if you see, for example, annual pavement management, 2 council members said that this aligns with high performing government, and 4 said that this project aligns with responsible development. And here's the second half. You'll see all the Parks and Rec project in the middle, everyone collecting a welcoming community there. So now we're going to talk about your guys' scoring in relation to the staff and residents that we talked about in December. So you all were on a priority ranking scale. Staff was asked questions on across 8 categories, and each response had a weight to it. So for public safety, for example, if it is mandatory for improving the public health and safety of our residents, that got a higher score than something that is perceived to increase the safety of our community. And then in terms of residents, they took our survey, which allowed them to allocate funds for focus areas and strategic goals. So how we assigned them a score is we took the list of projects, we assigned each project the focus area that it most closely aligned with, and then we took the strategic goals that you all said were related to each of those projects to create a weighted score out of 10. So we scaled all of these on a scale of 10. And this right here is showing council priorities from lowest to highest. and where staff scored in comparison. So when you see that line closely touching the tops of those bars, that means that those are some of the projects that are the highest alignment. And you will see, actually, on the next slide, that annual pavement shows up in both staff and council's top 5 projects, along with Fire Station 3 renovation and addition. Then moving to the residents aligning with council. This is again in order from lowest priority to highest priority for council. You'll see in the middle in there where the projects are aligning. And here you'll see for the residents top 5, they slightly differ. South Salem Street, Bicycle Connection, Public Safety Station 7, Apex Peakway Southwest, the traffic signal system, and Chatham Street Railroad crossing improvements. And some of that score, because it's weighted for the strategic goals that you all selected, if some of these projects, they align with more strategic goals, which gives that project a higher score because it's pushing forward more goals. This shows the disbursement of the goals that you all selected across all of the projects. You'll notice that all of our strategic goals are well represented, and on top of that, the order of the project of the strategic goals actually is in exact alignment with our resident survey. So responsible development was our top strategic goal, and that is most represented in our projects, followed by welcoming community, high performing government, economic vitality, and environmental leadership. And then here is our quadrants of projects. So you saw ranking top to bottom based on your average score, what the order of projects is. Here, what this chart is showing is while the average score might be higher up, it still may not, everybody might not have agreed on that project, right? We could have had somebody who had a much different opinion. So quadrant 1 means that the project scored above average and everybody was in agreement that this was a high scoring project. The opposite of that is quadrant 4, where those projects, they scored low and everybody agreed that they scored low. So the projects in quadrants 2 and 3 are the ones that there was less agreement on. So quadrant 2 is all the projects that were still above average in score, but below average in agreement, which means maybe 4 people said this was in their top 5 and 2 people said that it was a much lower project. And then quadrant 3 is where we have our projects that are below average in score. And again, there was below average agreement. So for some, those might have been very top of their list. And for others, it was much further down, which brought the score below average. So the purpose of this was to give you information. You guys saw this staff, you saw the resident survey. This is all of your results. So what the point of this is to prepare for tomorrow. We're going to go through a capital project activity. So we can discuss some of this, but we're not moving projects today. That will more so happen in the activity tomorrow. So do you have any comments or anything on it?
I have a comment in general, and I've got a question. Question is for Craig.
Yes, sir.
You have another $58 million project you want to put on the list?
I got a $98 million. That one is already on the list.
No, in all seriousness though, like we were talking about $942 million of project backlog identified here. That's not counting the new police station, that's not factored in, and some of the other facilities that we spoke about this morning. So we're looking at $1 billion in capital investment. There's no way we can do it all, right? So just want to kind of set expectations. There's a lot of good stuff here. But it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we prioritize the dollars appropriately and effectively, right? We'll get to that tomorrow. just the sheer scale of what we're talking about here, I think stands out.
And then these were just some of the comments. If anybody wants to expand this, we asked how you chose to prioritize projects, any key takeaways with doing this survey, and anything we should consider in addition. So we put kind of summarize most of the commentary received. So if you want to expand on any of that in the sake of conversation, you can do that.
Yeah, I'll say, kind of building up what Arnold just said, I think leveraging our dollars is really important going forward. I mean, it's always important, but, when we have the opportunities to, get matching funds and multiply the effect for dollars, like, I think one of my comments was in there, I was probably made into one of these statements is that, we should prioritize projects, even if it's not the highest priority for us, if we can get it at half cost. We keep doing that. One way to sort of chip away.
So to kind of finish what we started, is something that I feel strong about. Like, I don't want to keep redirecting and kind of stop and go on some of these projects, even if they're multi-year. So I kind of kept that in mind as I was doing my scoring abilities. The other thing is that, it's a longer list than the last couple, 3 years or 4 years that I've been part of this process. And so I think, or at least in my mind, we need to start knocking out some stuff, some quick wins, right? And so I kind of prioritize some lower cost initiatives that we can achieve within the timeframe of a fiscal year, right? Just to kind of chip away the backlog, leaving some of the much larger expenses like, what Greg is asking for, like $100 million, right? Because there's just no real way of addressing that, at least not given the current funding sources, right? And so I think that's a different conversation that we need to have around, bond issuance and all of that for those projects.
Yeah, and I think one of the things missing for my input here to my previous point is like looking at the capital list, where is there potential for funding that we just haven't gotten yet, that we delayed it a year or two, we might be able to apply for this grant, or it might be, better for a LAC project next year or the year after. And which one of these projects just has no chance? Like it's always gonna be us, or if we're not gonna do it, we can decide.
Yeah.
At that point. whether to
We
do it.
do typically in the CIP have the lab potential projects aligned with when we would take that forward to lab. So we don't show that funding source because it's so far out, we don't know that we would get that. But we do have that in consideration with the timelines that we, where we place things, but that's a great point.
Agree with the sentiment. When I go back to Jessica, included what you had said in the premise of the question, overall project cost, strategic goal alignment, community interest, schedule, dedicated funding, things got up there. But absolutely on the informally the quick wins. What projects could be considered lower financial input while potentially yielding higher impact. So yeah, I think generally speaking, right, this whole thing is the holiday wish list. And it's just a matter of trying to ensure that we're putting ones out there that the residents will see as demonstrated value while also efficient of the dollars.
Yeah, and maybe a little nuance to that. I don't look at it as purely wish list, right? There's things that we need to do, especially in the utilities ones. But there's also things that we know are going to be a problem or are currently a problem, and we need to resolve it. The Old Chapel Barbecue intersection, we know as soon as the south of the Peakway Connector Bridge opens, Tinton Road intersection is going to be a problem. Right, so trying to get ahead of some of those things by, putting our chips down now, right? I think it will help stave off a lot of resident frustration, right? And then, transit or transportation being kind of the number one thing that we hear about, right? Again, like those were kind of some of the thoughts that's went through my head as I was prioritizing.
So looking ahead to tomorrow, Our activity will be in 3 parts. You guys will be split into 2 groups and you'll have a pot of money that we can currently fund, including our debt model, to create a balanced CIP. And then you also have the option to add additional funding to the SIF to fund more projects. So we will have station setups with project representatives if you have any questions. And we also have boards that will have all the information that you guys have been given up to this point, the staff scoring, the resident survey alignments, as well as the funding amounts. And then you guys will present your balanced projects to everybody about based on what kind of led you to those decisions and how you got to that final project selection. And then we will take the projects that both teams chose to fund, and that will be the base of our final priority list. And then we'll engage in a wider discussion with all of you about filling in what's left, basically, to create, kind of set our priorities for the capital plan.
Everybody excited? Excited. And we tested it. So staff put a lot of work into it and also was tested at our director's group for make sure it works. We tweaked it a little bit. All right. Ready for next? Celeste is coming forward. We have a special projects team report. So she wants to go over kind of past special project teams where we are, potential future project teams we're creating, just to give you a high level overview of this program.
So just to begin, I'm going to go ahead and start with a brief history of special projects teams, just because I do have newer council members here. So in mid-2024, Town Manager Randy Foxberg got the idea of launching special projects teams, also known as SPTs, to enhance cross-departmental collaboration and empower employees to creative solutions for challenges in our organization. Each SPT team is led by a non-director, and it includes about 4 to 6, sometimes 8 members representing multiple departments. And these are short time frame projects that typically range about 90 days. There is some flexibility for a longer time frame, and these teams focus on meaningful lasting improvements. At the conclusion of their work, they present their recommendations, strategies, and or suggestions to the director team when we have our the directors meeting, which has an opportunity for directors to provide feedback. And by dedicating focused time to exploring challenges and opportunities, special projects teams contribute to more efficient, sustainable solutions that benefit the entire organization. And I'll show you the list in the future slides of all the special projects teams. But what's a benefit here is it provides an opportunity for leadership for various roles within the organizations to be team lead. So we have diversity among where people fall within this organization. So it's building leadership opportunities as well. So to date, we have 16 special projects teams that have launched, resulting in a variety of cross-departmental outcomes, operational improvements, and strategic recommendations. Today, we'll talk about outcomes, current status, and updates, and future team initiatives. So far, we've completed, I call them cohorts. I don't know if anyone else refers to them as that. But in our first round, we had the agenda development process, downtown parking mitigation, capital projects dashboards, civilian elementary SROs, contract routing process, employee checkup response plan, ERC structure review, fleet plan development, special events policy update, and then cohort 2, downtown streetscapes, e-bikes, facility safety, promotion and outreach, policy inventory, onboarding, and meter life cycle. And some of these may be familiar to you all because the example would be that special events policy is coming before council for adoption. Some key metrics, again, 16 special projects teams, over 70 participants throughout our organization. 15 projects have been presented at directors meetings and approximately 11 projects have been completed. So here are the updates with the agenda development process, as you all probably aware, that has been presented, completed, and it's implemented. Downtown parking mitigation has been presented and completed, resulting in construction is complete, over 152 additional parking spaces, and increased number of EV charging spaces. Capital projects dashboard has been presented to directors. We did pause for a second round of special projects teams. There is an option for there to be a next round, which would use different folks within the organization to pursue that. But the second round of the capital projects dashboard has been paused just due to new software opportunities that we have here. Civilian elementary SROs, we've heard a lot about that topic already. Now that that's going to be moving to the responsibility of at the department level. Contract routing process that's been presented, purchased, and is implemented. We're currently in use with our new with Jura. Employee checkup response plan that was resulting after the survey, and that's presented. Recommendations have been utilized. ERC structure review has been presented and completed, and it is now in operation. Its new structure is now known as the EXT, which is the Employee Extension Team. The fleet plan development has been presented. The plan has been developed, and appropriate departments are reviewing the plan currently. Special events policy updates, you're all pretty aware of this one. It's been presented, completed. And with our second cohort, the downtown streetscapes has been presented. And then council approved at the work session to move forward. E-bikes has been presented. We're still pending what the next direction is going to be with that. Facility safety is planned to present on February 18th. And then promotion and outreach has been presented. The next step is if we're going to, how we're going to move forward. If we're going to opt in with the plan or opt out with the plan that they presented. Some more information on that. And then policy inventory was a special projects team to pretty much collect all of our policies within the organization, just kind of keeping them in one repository so we can easily find them. And there will be, we are anticipating a second round of this particular project team. Onboarding was looking at our onboarding practices and best practices for town staff. And that has been presented and moved to the HR department for further implementation. And then last that we have on the list is the meter life cycle, which is implemented and resulting in launch mass metering things out currently underway. So what's next? And want to talk a little bit about how we select our special projects team topics. Disregard the meter life cycle up there. That should not be there. We've already got that. But when we have our extended leadership team meetings, there's an opportunity, an activity where staff brainstorms new project ideas in small groups. And also it's an opportunity for them to prioritize an existing list that we have. So special projects teams is not just an opportunity for the team lead and participants, but it's also an opportunity for buy-in across the whole organization to provide their ideas on what should our special projects teams look like. So we have a backlog, we have a lot of ideas. And so this is our current list. This is in no particular order because we have not announced the 2026 spring topics, but this is a sample. So data governance and PII policy, travel policy, purchasing policy thresholds. Some of these might be taking a look at current policies that we already have. Cross-departmental shadowing, fund committee, sustainability, employee giving, volunteer committee, parking enforcement strategy, process standards, and construction projects. So you see that there's also a level of intensity with the different topics as well. So some are a bit more lighthearted. And then we have some new brainstormed ideas. Office temp policy sounds funny. I'm very cold in here. So I thought that was, that was a good one. B and Tree city review and revamp. Development of citizen champions to help with outreach, which is a topic that actually came up earlier today, so excited to hear about that. Cell phone reimbursement, I think that's taking a look at what our current cell phone reimbursement policy is. Personnel policy, a quick reference sheet, so some sheets or workflow sheets that can be handed out among departments in leadership. AI policy / training, and again, describe the meter life cycle. So this is what's happening next, and we have not formally selected the next round, but this was the sample.
So Celeste, are these ideas all generated by the ELT members?
For the most part.
I think the ones on the left, or some left from previous ELT, some may be from administration. ELT on the right came out of our last meeting that we had a few weeks back.
So how would the employees follow the suggestion, right? So kind of the modern day equivalent of the suggestion box, right? So especially if you're looking back at the survey results, right, and then kind of having a voice in what's going on in the town, right? This feels a little bit top down driven. I'm not saying that these are bad initiatives, right? But how do we give employees a voice? Hey, I see something here that I think is worth exploring, right? A water resources guy might be, out in the field, doing the same 6 things over and over and over, but there's a better way, right? Like, why am I doing this way, right? So how do we kind of flow some of those ideas into these special project teams?
Yeah, so I think number one, acknowledging we could do a better job at getting to those ideas. But also I would say that in particular, I could think of the last post survey from the 23, when we did the tour for all the departments. We got several ideas that bubbled up through that process. One of them that I can think of, and it always seems to work out. We get the idea from ELT as well. So I think it's bubbling up that way, but we got some direct input. For one, which for lack of, I don't remember what we're going to call it now, but an internal Peak Academy. That came through ELT, but it also came from when we were out touring around and talking to the departments. A lot of the line level frontline staff, they said, hey, we don't know what this department's even doing. And so some of these ideas did come directly from those conversations. And I think that that's something Linda's hearing this discussion as well. We're getting ready to kick off those tours again. And I think you get a lot of good ideas that feed into special projects that we evaluate. So maybe having a little more intentional focus that these ideas can help into, but it's kind of organically happened to this point.
And to add to that too, so I manage the broader coordination of special project teams. And so what's interesting is, it's kind of hard to show in the presentation, but just walking around, people do have ideas. And so they'll either email me or they're like, oh, is this a special projects team? Could this be a special projects team? So that happens to just be email or people kind of coming up to admin staff ideas.
Linda, you want to add?
Yeah, and I just wanted to let you know, we partnered with the ESC team. So I went and I gave them a presentation about where we're going with that flight. And so they have actually given us feedback. So we will be going back and working with them to let those ideas work together. And then secondly, they were very engaged in promoting the service. So what I did for them is I gathered all of the department director staff meetings, and they went out because they were talking about the importance of thinking this further. Well, not from a director, but from a employee to peer level. I really appreciate it.
So EXT is another avenue that absolutely can be where some of these ideas come from. But I think to your point, we could take an intentional approach in those venues to say, hey, let's have an organized fashion to solicit ideas.
And then celebrate it, right? Hey, like, we just got this great idea from an employee, right? This is what we did with it, right? We researched it, we presented it, counted this, right? Makes people feel good, but also makes it send a clear message that, you are being heard, right? Not everything is just driven top down, right?
And we've also highlighted it in the newsletter too, that's gone out to staff.
What is ERC structure?
So ERC, Employee Relations Committee, which was, we revamped that structure to the employee extension team. And so it has just a more relevant model. and tighter guidelines, I would say. It's more structured.
And
for
it's more,
communities.
it's got proportional representation, I think was a big factor. So we have larger departments that before they may have had with one rep on it. So he has multiple reps, electric has multiple reps now. It's got more, definitely more of a structure to it under EXT. You commit to a multi-year. It's a multi-year commitment to be on that team, but it's basically a mechanism to, that represents all the departments. I don't, and you may be a supervisor, but I think in most cases it's non-supervisors, but they're.
And then it's also broken out because it is so large that it's also broken out into committees and subcommittees as well.
Yeah, several subcommittees, they are big on our peak performer awards. Anyone else? Carmen, you want to add anything? Well, Steve.
For me, I think the biggest piece is communication, and that, you know, they are hearing from their peers and their coworkers about what's going on in the departments. They're communicating that to their steering committee and to steering committees communicating that.
Thank you.
Really quickly, just a quick description on what the sustainability and the parking enforcement strategy.
Sean, do we have a?
I can talk about the parking enforcement
Okay.
strategy real quick. So that one is one that we've kicked around. As you know, we have different spaces that are marked out downtown. How that started was during the Saunders lot and for fewer spaces, and so we need to enforce time limits. We've marked the spaces. I will say we probably didn't come behind it with as much enforcement as we had anticipated. And now we've got some proposals to change those spaces around. But before we dive fully into that, we want to make sure, number one, that there's still a need, right? Because if you go downtown, there's been pretty good parking. So if we don't need to be heavy-handed and restrictive, then why continue that practice? So we want to look at that. But we've also talked about then what is the proper enforcement mechanism in terms of who tickets, who pays, who collects the money. So we've got to kind of go through all those issues, but before we get into that, is it a practice that we need to continue? So we're kind of monitoring with the reduction of spaces on Salem, how that's impacting parking before we dive fully into that. And we have a potential item to bring the council if we want to continue that route, but if not, then it might be not as heavy.
So is it localized then to downtown, or I didn't know if it spread to like how to manage senior center parking? I know it's packed at 9 a.m. and then you may have staff having a hard time to park. I was just curious how.
So there is a broader
I know it's
aspect to
Mission
it.
Creek, so I didn't want to.
But part of it is we've dealt with a lot, and you guys have been fixed with some of the challenges on street parking in different areas. And that speaks to parking enforcement in broader terms. So I would say that's an aspect to it as well that we may need to explore. We've got some. Councilmember Move has been approached by a couple people related to Shepherd's Vineyard, and so there are some issues of parking outside of downtown that we may need to tackle.
Thanks. I didn't know the scope on that. And then
And
sustainability.
then with sustainability, Sean, is that, do we know if that's internal or external?
We had a chance to review we haven't had a chance to,
Yeah.
we haven't had a chance to review what the kind of explanation behind, more detail what these are. With sustainability, based on other prior comments you've had, I think it's on what you heard yesterday or last night with our sustainability plan. There's smaller portions of that within small things that we want. And that they're working on. I think there's going to be pieces of that. What are we doing? Not necessarily like our footprint, gas, things like that, but how we really want to do better. Reducing our waste like that. And recycling. I believe that's what we do.
And then with the workflow, so they, we collect the topics and then once we take like the team lead, then they develop what the scope of the project to be. So it's a little vague right now. And then once we take the team lead, they'll work with the
I love
scope.
the fun committee.
Yeah. Right. Sounds fun. The other questions?
No?
All right. Good. Thank you, Celeste. So. Yes. I think we're slightly ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. The only thing there that I had left is I just wanted to mention a couple of potential homework items. that to look for the next couple of days. Obviously, you don't have to do anything, but it might be beneficial. When I look to tomorrow, we have a session on council policies. So if, and I know some of you have already provided information and feedback to Alan on that, but if you would take a few minutes to think through any potential policies that you would like to bring forward. The point of tomorrow's discussion is to make sure we're all on the same page as far as what policies are being created. It's not to go through the policies. So just think about it maybe tonight.
Is there nothing, not anything in that? No.
So think about it tonight. If there's something that you want to share tomorrow, related to your government, so council. That's for tomorrow. Then Friday, looking ahead, Alan has checkmate coming in, and there's going to be an exercise related to legislative priorities. So they certainly will have all the information that you need, but if there's something in particular that you would like to bring to that discussion or consider for a legislative priority, now's a good time to be thinking of that for Friday. And the final piece is looking towards new initiatives, which will happen on Friday. Christy is currently updating the dashboard with what we decided today to turn different things green. And then she'll email that out to you all. So you'll have the dashboard of initiatives for the last 3 years. So Friday, we're going to ask you to kind of bring forward any new initiatives. We'll have an exercise where you can put it within the respective strategic plan goal area. But if you want to start putting thought into that, so you're just deer in headlights on Friday. Oh no, now I've got to think of new initiatives. So that's. Other than that, that's all that we.
I was just gonna ask about that specifically. I was reluctant during the budget prioritization to add a bunch of other things when I saw Councilman Zegler's point of having nearly $1 billion in potential projects. But should we be thinking everything from modest in scope to ambitious? What's the?
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up because of the timing. We held on new initiatives. We normally would have looked at this at our strategic planning meeting, but because we knew we were going to have at least 2 members seated, we wanted to hold that until the retreat time period. So the problem with that though is we are so close to budget that if you bring up a new initiative that is budget intensive, then I would not look to that to be into the budget this year. We'd be looking at a 27 budget item. So knowing that, what you're proposing on Friday could be a this year initiative if it's less resource intense and maybe on the lower end. But if it's more budget intensive, it's probably something we'd have to push or come back to you all and say, hey, we need to amend our budget to address this initiative. So we're looking at maybe a 1 to 2 to 3 year time period on some of the initiatives. But just knowing we're so close to budget. Yeah, we'll have to work within existing resources. Yeah, in most cases. But
I was just thinking short runway. But yeah.
Anyone else?
Knock out dark place real quick.
Yeah, I think John's going to need a little more time. But you mean pivot it, move it to today?
65 slides or something.
Pretend ready.
Yeah.
Late night.
Yeah. Thank you. Take rest of the day off.
Oh, that's good.
Well,
Yeah, you can leave it. You can leave it here.
I just leave it here.
Are we in this room for the plan meeting?
Electric. Electric.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
in your neighborhood.
It is, yeah.
It's your house. It's your house.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.